Browns fans. Welcome to the Dawgland Podcast. I am your host, Anthony Joki. Alongside me, Jackson McCurry. And today, the Cleveland Browns have a brand new head coach. He is the former offensive coordinator from the Baltimore Ravens, Todd Monken. Definitely, probably not who we were expecting it to be. But before we get to that, Jack, I know it's kind of been a crazy few days here, but how are we doing? How are we feeling?
Doing okay, man. Yeah, like these last 3 or 4 days have been wild. So many twists and turns in the coaching search, and like you said, it wasn't who we expected. It's probably not who we wanted, but Todd Monken is the new man leading the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, and hopefully you survived all those snowstorms down there and was dealing with all that. It was
Yeah,
pretty nuts up here. But yeah, I mean it's you know, not who we were expecting for sure in terms of where the Browns were going to go in terms of their new head coach. So, we now have Todd Monken as the new head coach of the Browns, and this process that they have gone through, has been heavily scrutinized, and this is the ultimate conclusion that they ended on. They interviewed 11 people, narrowed it down to three, it seemed like, with Nate Shieldhouse, Jim Schwartz, and Todd Monken. After a handful of candidates said no, thank you, including Grant Udinski, Mike McDaniel, others as well. So we land on Todd Monken. What's your take on how we got to this point to where this is the ultimate decision that the Browns made for this?
I mean, honestly, and it's part of the reason why I was infuriated because you know that a lot of people I talked to, and just the whole process, it just seemed like it was off. It didn't feel right. It felt like it was another situation where Jimmy Haslam was like, and I get it, he's the owner. Just felt like he was overstepping. He was trying to force things that realistically were never going to happen. That's apparent after all the news that happened today. It just seemed like you stand there and you say Andrew Barry's leading the search. And we've heard that song and dance before. We heard Paul DePodesta was leading the search. We heard Sashi Brown was leading the search, and things swerved one way or another. And it seems like that's always been the MO under Jimmy Haslam. And that even goes back to Banner and Lombardi. Like we knew that they would want somebody, and then chaos would happen, and there's finger pointing, there's infighting, and it's just been chaotic under Jimmy Haslam's regime as owner. And, we kind of thought things were going to go smoothly this time. Andrew Barry, like you said, he interviewed a wide range of candidates, narrowed it down. First, we thought it was going to be Udinski, but, you know, according to what we heard, interview didn't go well. The guys he brought as potential staff members weren't very appealing from what we've heard. So then we kind of thought it was Nate Shieldhouse, which is we don't know what those guys were going to be like. Obviously, young, up and coming offensive guys like those sound really appealing, especially coming from the McVay tree, the Kevin O'Connell coaching tree, which obviously is another twist off the McVay tree. Like, just sounds like young, innovative, exciting, like giving us hope. And then obviously, like the Jim Schwartz stuff, which we'll get to, like that screamed Jimmy Haslam. And there's a lot of mixed rumors, reports on was Jimmy forcing Schwartz to be on whoever's staff, and did that shy away candidates? We don't know. I mean, we've heard things, but there's been other reports that said Schwartz was never staying, so that's just a whole nother twist in this. Like, it just seemed like Anthony to me, the process to how we got here seemed really flawed, and that's on Jimmy Haslam. Like, I can't fault Andrew Barry for this because he conducted the search. It seemed like he had a target in mind. Uh, but we got to where we are today with Monken. Like, kind of feel bad for Todd Monken because he's in a tough spot, and I feel bad for Andrew Barry. But one man I don't feel bad for is Jimmy Haslam because he puts this all on himself.
How do we feel about Haslam seeming to be very okay with familiarity? Because they brought Andrew Berry back as a GM when he was in the front office beforehand. They brought Freddie Kitchens back after him being the offensive coordinator after Hugh was let go. Um, they brought back Todd Monken now after he was the offensive coordinator here. They really consider Jim Schwartz. Like, is this something that's a flaw of Haslam, or is it because things have gone so wrong or so wrong for so long that they have found a few people that they've been able to trust over the years, and that's why they kind of circle back to Andrew Barry, they circle back to Freddie, they circle back to Schwartz, they circle back now to Munkin. Is that kind of what has happened here, you think?
Um, with other people, definitely, but like with Munkin, like you've seen some of the stuff that's been rehashed from 2019. I think it was Zach Jackson from the Athletic who wrote that like Munkin was telling people how bad the situation was in Cleveland. Like, and I'm sure like if you know and you've read about Todd Monken, you know he's very blunt, he's very upfront, he's going to tell it like it is. Maybe he told Jimmy this, maybe Jimmy respected it. Um, but definitely, I think Jimmy does get comfortable, and he definitely leans on people. Like Paul DePodesta was here for 10 years. Andrew Barry's been here. Like you between his two stints, like close to 10 years, because he went away for a year to Philly. Um, yeah, like he definitely gets comfortable with people. He definitely is very trustworthy with people. But um, yeah, I feel like with Jimmy, like, I think he's trying to right wrongs from the past. Like, yeah, he saw what Andrew Barry did those first couple years, and then him leaving, and then leaning on Deep Podesta to bring him back as GM. I think that was like trying to right the wrong of the whole Sashi Brown experience. Like, I think he's seen that things were working to a degree in that aspect. And I also keep thinking, like, when he's trying to find these offensive minds, I feel like he's trying to right the wrong of the whole Kyle Shanahan situation and how that went down and how he left and how Kyle's now had success in San Francisco ever since. Like, I think he's trying to find that offensive mind that he knows he let slip away. Obviously, there was some success to a degree with Kevin Stefanski, and now he's trying to find that next offensive mind and trying to find that quarterback. I don't know if the quarterback thing is like, yeah, I really screwed up with the whole Baker Mayfield situation, which was it went around, it was everybody's fault. But yeah, I think Jimmy does try to make things right, but then I also think he like oversteps it at times in that aspect as well.
I totally buy Jim Schwartz as being a legit candidate, with what he's done for the defense, for this team over a handful of years. And I have no problem with, casting a wide net and interviewing 11 people for this job, getting their thoughts on the organization. And, it turns out the essay thing was probably not true. Aditi kind of put a kibosh to that this morning, but just casting a wide net, seeing what people thought, seeing what their interests were, uh, picking their brain on some of their philosophies, and just kind of garnering a little bit of knowledge here from around the rest of the league. The tough part is that you get down to these three, and it seemed like whoever they hired, they wanted Schwartz to be their DC, but now after naming Todd Monken head coach, uh, Schwartz is probably not going to be here because there were reports today that he stormed out of Berea, is very unhappy, cleared out his desk, everything. That I'm not coming back, and now you're in a situation to where if you were uh, putting this whole coaching search around keeping Schwartz as your defensive coordinator to move forward, and now you gave him a legitimate thought that he could be hired for head coach. Now that he's potentially on the way out, did hamstrung yourself in terms of, all right, these candidates were never going to come because you were forcing this arranged marriage, so to say, and now he's not going to be here. Could this have gone way differently if that wasn't the option to begin with?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know the full story about like the whole Jim Schwartz situation. Like obviously what he's done with the defense, like that's someone you want to keep around, but you don't want to force on a new head coach. And, there's been a lot of mixed messages and rumors and, sourcing info. Like there's a lot of people that said, yeah, Jim Schwartz was being forced upon to whoever these head coaches were. And honestly, like if let's just say hypothetically Grant Udinsky or Mike McDaniel or whoever, like if they got to the table and it was like, yeah, we really want you to keep Jim Schwartz. And if it was a mandate, then it's kind of like, you want me to be the head coach, but you're going to tell me who's going to be on my staff. Like, I think that's been, that's kind of been an issue here over the years. I remember the whole Freddie Kitchens coaching search, like that was widely rumored that like whoever was coming in, the Browns were asking like, "Hey, can you keep Freddie on as offensive coordinator?" And they like that'll shy candidates away. And we look and we saw what happened with Freddie. And Jim Schwartz has been around the league a long time. Obviously, has had great success as a coordinator. His head coaching resume not very strong. Yes, he got Detroit turned around, but then it fell apart in the end. Like, if they were trying to make Jim Schwartz stay, like for whoever they were going to ultimately hire as head coach, I think it was a bad move. I think there was hope when they hired Monken that relationship was going to be a potential like happy ending for everybody. Like Schwartz was going to get to stay, run the defense. Monken, leads the team, but doesn't sound like that's going to happen based on some of the reporting. Like we'll see what happens. Obviously, Schwartz has a year left on his contract. Um, the Browns can deny any requests from teams, but that goes back to a whole Kyle Shanahan situation. Like, are you going to keep a guy that doesn't want to be here under contract? Are you going to create a potential situation where, when OTAs and minicamp starts and the team's back together, you got defensive players that really wanted Schwartz to be head coach, and is that going to create a rift in the locker room already for something that Todd Monken's going to have to try to overcome? Like, if I'm the Browns, I would just, release Schwartz out of his contract, let him leave, let Monken hire who he wants as a defensive coordinator and just move forward. Like, yeah, that might sour some of the defensive players, especially, Miles, Denzel, guys that have been around, guys that praised and endorsed Jim Schwartz, but you can't create a more toxic environment than it potentially already is. You gotta, this is a new fresh start and you got to go into it with a good mindset that hopefully everybody can be on the same page.
It didn't take very long for somebody to suggest them being co-head coaches. I'm not sure if you have seen that or not. And judging by your eye roll, I
I,
guess you did.
I'm blocked by her, but I saw it and I was just like, "What in the hell?"
It's funny like that was suggested to me. But yeah, the defense of guys, Miles, Denzel. The reports were that they were really pushing for Schwartz to be the head coach, and maybe that's why he got as much consideration as he did. Those guys really love him. Schwartz seems to unlock a different level for Miles over the last handful of seasons. Denzel Ward's, playing at an all-time great clip as well. You see the development of guys like Grant Delpit, Schlesinger this year, JOK as well. When he was healthy, other guys along that defense, and I could imagine that whole defensive locker room, is probably a little bit upset at right now without having Jim Schwartz, as a head coach. So, maybe he could stick around to BDC. There will be a lot that would have to be worked out between Monken and Schwartz, and maybe not even between those two, but more Schwartz and the front office. I think is where that aspect of it would have to be repaired the most. And I don't know if that's something that is going to get repaired. And it just seems like the writing's on the wall that he's not going to be here, and they're going to have to find a new defensive coordinator. But let's dive into Todd Monken because he is a new head coach of the Browns. We want to kind of go over his career here, what he's been able to do in the NFL, in college. And he started in the NFL with the Jacksonville Jaguars as a receivers coach back in 2007. After that, he went to be an offensive coordinator, Oklahoma State. He was the Southern Miss head coach for 3 seasons, before coming back to the NFL to being the Tampa Bay Buccaneers receiver coach and offensive coordinator from 2016 to 2018. He was the Browns offensive coordinator in 2019. After the one and done of Freddie Kitchens as head coach and being his OC, he went back to college to be the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach for Georgia, where they won 2 national championships. After that, joined John Harbaugh in Baltimore for 3 years, and we've seen what they've been able to do there. So, his career has kind of been all over the place between college and pro, has worked with many different types of quarterbacks in his career. What are we thinking about? Obviously he's been around and worked with a lot of different talent. How do we think that, what he's been able to work with could benefit here?
The one thing that really struck out to me right away was his adaptability offensively. I mean, you look at you mentioned all the places he's been, um, college. It, I break it down into 3 different types of quarterbacks, Anthony, that he's worked with. Gunslinger types, going back to Oklahoma State, worked with Brandon Whedon, his last season at Oklahoma State. Obviously, Whedon, Justin Blackman had incredible numbers there. That last year, both were first round draft picks. So you could definitely point to Monken, his coaching, his uh, development. And then you look at the NFL, Tampa Bay worked with another gunslinger type, Jameis Winston. I saw Mike Evans uh, gave him high praise for helping him with his route running abilities. So that's a definite mark from Monken. Obviously, that a future Hall of Fame wide receiver credited Monken for his coaching. Another gunslinger type, Baker Mayfield, that 1 year here in Cleveland, and then you go to Georgia in his college coaching career. Stenson Bennett was definitely more of a game manager type at quarterback. They definitely relied on the running game there in Georgia. And then coming back to Baltimore, working with a dual threat quarterback like Lamar Jackson. I think Monken's adaptability to an offense and that he will adapt his offensive philosophies to fit the personnel. I think that's one of the things that really is eye catching when you look into Todd Monken's background, his offensive philosophies, and that he's not stuck on one scheme. He will adapt his offense and his offensive philosophies to fit the personnel. And I think that's one of the definite qualities to looking at into Todd Monken's offensive style of play.
Yeah, I think that's kind of been, one of the contention points with Kevin over the last handful of years is he was trying to find pieces to play in his scheme, and just it goes back to the old square peg in a round hole kind of a thing. Now you have a head coach to where he's had many different types of players over his career, been able to coach many different types of quarterbacks, many different types of receivers, running backs. Like, he has had so much different talent, and he's been able to adapt his scheme and have success in different places. So now you look at where this Browns team is offensively, you have a couple young quarterbacks at the moment. You have young running backs, young tight ends, an offensive line that needs reworked. So his work is going to be cut out for him to figuring out how to utilize what we have currently in the best possible position, as well as pairing them with, free agent talent, draft talent coming up here in the next couple months. But he definitely has his work cut out for him and using this type of um, offensive scheme with whatever he decides to run. Now we know they like to run the football. That's something over the last 3 seasons in Baltimore that they have been really successful with. 2023, they're first in yards, third in yards per attempt. 2024, first in yards per attempt. 2025, second in yards and first in yards per attempt. And when you have players like Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry that could run the damn football, you can expect that this team, this Browns team, is going to be running the football here, with him as a head coach, which is something that, you know, Kevin was trying to get back to. The offensive line hasn't really allowed that to happen, so hopefully they're able to do that. Um, I'm very interested to see if it's Shador coming up here this season as your quarterback and having Judkins and Sampson as your two running backs, what they could potentially do in terms of getting back to running the football and having a dominant rushing attack.
Yeah, I mean, and you go back to his 1 year in Cleveland, and we know that Freddie was calling the plays, or there was a rift between those two, and all that. But Nick Chubb was second in the NFL in rushing that 1 year. So I kind of wonder if any of Monken's offensive philosophies made us seeped into Freddie Kitchens. We know they ranked towards the bottom in terms of rushing because they did throw the ball a lot, and that was kind of one of the things that was irritating because they had Chubb and they had Kareem Hunt down the stretch, and like the running game just was never there. But in Baltimore, like, and when they hired him, I was like, I wonder how they're going to keep doing what they've been doing in Baltimore because it was Greg Roman before Monken, and obviously they had a ton of success running the ball, but they obviously add Derrick Henry 2 years ago, and they definitely leaned on the running game, whether it was Henry and Lamar. They sprinkled in Justice Hill. They had Keaton Mitchell, who was also utilized as a weapon at times there in Baltimore. But yeah, they leaned on the running game. And if you're Quinshon Judkins and Dylan Sampson and anybody anybody else that could potentially be coming into that running back room, like you got to be excited because you've seen what they were able to do in Baltimore. Um, Obviously, it helps having a athletic quarterback like Lamar Jackson, which the Browns don't really have. Like Deshaun obviously has had mobility in the past, but coming off two Achilles tears, like we don't know if that mobility's gone. Shador liked to scramble around, but he's obviously not the most athletic quarterback. So that's kind of a hindrance for them in that regard. But if I'm Judkins and Sampson, I would be excited about this hire because Monken does like to run the football, and Judkins and Sampson both showed their abilities here in their rookie season, and I would have to think they're pretty darn happy about this hire because it's definitely getting back to a running style that we have severely missed this last couple years in Cleveland.
So in two places where he's been in Tampa Bay and in Baltimore, they drafted a couple pretty good receivers. When he was there, 2017, they drafted Chris Godwin. His first year in Baltimore, they drafted Zay Flowers in the first round. Obviously, receiver has been a big contention point for the Browns. How much of a focus do you think that they'll put on that in this upcoming draft to get Monken a bona fide number one receiver?
Oh, I think that was the goal regardless of who they were hiring. I mean, Andrew Berry said that, the emphasis was on improving the offense. So wide receiver is definitely a need. It's something that they can hit in the first round of the draft, whether it's at 6 or 24, whether it's Carnell Tate, Makai Lemon, KZ Concepcion, Jordan Tyson. Like there's options there for the Browns in the first round at wide receiver. Monken coached wide receiver, obviously at Jacksonville, so I think he knows the emphasis of the position. It's definitely something he values. We saw Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman at times thrive in that offense. Um, I got to think the tight ends are going to be thrilled. Harold Fannin, maybe David Njoku. The passing attack is definitely going to be upgraded. I think on coaching, I think personnel could make it that'll get improved as well. Hopefully in free agency and the draft. Like the Browns said that they were going to get this offense fixed, and Todd Monken, like you said, has had successful offenses. He's worked with young wide receivers in this league. Like this is a I mean, this is a good sneaky hire potentially, and we've seen the work he's been able to do in his numerous stops around the league. So you gotta feel a little hopeful that this offense is definitely going to get turned around with him.
I want to ask about one more thing about our current personnel offensively. So in Baltimore, he had Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. But right now, he has Harold Fannin. Does this, do you think, open the door for Njoku to come back for somebody that's really like to use a couple of tight ends over the last handful of seasons in Baltimore?
I don't know on. Njoku. I feel like something would have got done by now to get him back. Um, but you mentioned Isaiah Likely, and guess who's going to be an unrestricted free agent this offseason? He
That's
is.
an interesting
And
one.
it is an interesting one. I would imagine he's going to be sought after in free agency, because he's been utilized at times to be like a number one receiver or number one tight end. Obviously, he's been behind Mark Andrews. I don't know how he would feel about coming here and potentially teaming up with Fannin, but we've seen obviously like 6 years ago, Austin Hooper was the top tight end on the market. He came to Cleveland knowing Njoku was here, and they added another tight end in Harrison Bryant in the draft. But like I said, it's about the personnel. If you have multiple pretty good tight ends, I think he will cater to that offense or fit that offense to utilize both weapons like he did with Andrews and Likely. Um, but yeah, Likely will be a free agent. I don't know if the Browns would be able to uh, pay what he's commanding out there on the open market, but it's an interesting thought to say the least.
Yeah, very curious to see how that could shake out. And Andrews just signed that extension this season as well for Baltimore, so there's a lot of money tied up there. And I know they have a lot of people to pay this offseason, one being their center, which we'll get into in free agent talk. Um,
Yeah,
I we want to talk about the his potential staff as well. So if there is no Jim Schwartz, he's going to have to hire an offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. It seems like Bubba Ventrone won't be back. He's actually interviewing with Pittsburgh, which please Pittsburgh, like please take him, and the Rams, which after their special teams disaster this postseason and entire season, I'm not sure why you would go that route, but I maybe nobody really watches the Browns games to see how poor things were special teams wise. So go right ahead. Um,
definitely a head scratcher.
yeah, for sure. So the Browns are gonna have to put together a whole coaching staff here, and I heard about uh one hire that is probably coming from Ashley, my girlfriend. She told me this afternoon, she's like, she was one of the first people to see it, that offensive line coach George Warhop is coming back to the Browns. He was here from 2009 to 2013 when he had the likes of Joe Thomas. Was Steinbach still here at that point?
I
Um,
think he was getting ready to check out.
Alex Mack, Mitchell Schwartz. So there were a lot of really good offensive line players when he was here beforehand, and we've seen what the Baltimore offensive line has been able to put back together over the last handful of seasons while he's been there. So I think that this hire, as long as he does come here for sure, that this one can be as important as Bill Callahan was a few seasons ago.
Yeah, definitely. Joe Thomas was on Cleveland Browns Daily this afternoon, and it was like right when the news broke, and he gave high praise. I think Warhomp was very instrumental in getting the best out of Joe Thomas, and that was like right in his prime from '09 to 13. Obviously played a hand in the development of Alex Mack and Mitchell Schwartz and John Greco. I reached out to Jason Pinkston on X, and Pinkston gave high praise, said love the guy. So I think Warhomp was definitely a great coach and mentor to some pretty good offensive linemen during their time in Cleveland. So it sounds like that move's going to happen. And Anthony, it sounds like the Browns and the Giants are in a bidding war for the coaching staff, because it sounds like Monken got right to work and is trying to get some guys to come join him in Cleveland. Which, looking at some of the staff that's still there, because obviously Minter's the head coach out there now, but definitely there's guys that they're looking to bring over. I know they requested to interview an offensive assistant coach to come be the pass game coordinator. There's been a lot of rumors about who they could potentially bring on as offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, and it'll be interesting to see who Monken brings over for his staff, because he's obviously been in a lot of places during his years as an NFL and college coach, and I think he should be able to put together a quality staff, given all his connections throughout the league.
I have something interesting here, and I had forgot about this. Did you do you know who one of the senior defensive assistants was for the Ravens last year, who came back to
I'm
the
looking
NFL?
at it. I'm looking at it. I know who you're referring to, Chuck Pagano.
Yeah, that would be extremely interesting to me if, Schwartz does not return, and if Pagano is up for, because we know he's had a lot of health issues and has battled through all those like a champion, over
Absolutely.
the last 5-10 years or so. If he's up for the challenge of, being a defensive coordinator or even just coming here to coach in a different role, I think, like, that could be a great move for Monken and the coaching staff.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't been a defensive coordinator since 2020 when he was with the Bears, and he had a pretty good defense those couple years he was there. Um, yeah, I mean, if he's open to it, I know he's just a senior assistant. I know he's been working with Pat McAfee show, and they does film breakdowns on there. But if he's in it, like that would be a home run hire. I know Anthony Weaver, who was the Dolphins defensive coordinator, has been rumored and linked to Munkin as a potential DC if the Schwartz thing doesn't get resolved. Um, Either one of those guys. I mean, Anthony Weaver was here as the D line coach during the Mike Pettin years, so he's got a familiarity to Cleveland as well. So if they could get one of those two to be DC, I think that would be good. I think that would help ease a lot of the Browns fans, the local media, the ones that love Jim Schwartz. Uh, that would ease the pain a little bit if they could lure in one of those two big names for sure for DC.
One of the interviews that really went under the radar and it seemed like they were trying to keep it secret, and it could be one of those that when it was under the guise of a head coaching interview, but it's actually for offensive coordinator. How do we feel if they brought in Anthony Lynn to be an offensive coordinator?
Another guy with familiarity in Cleveland. He was the running back coach during I think it was the Cornell years. Definitely has a soft spot for Cleveland, I think. If you want to improve the running game, I think that's a definite home run hire. If you brought in Lynn, he's been a offensive coordinator at numerous spots. Definitely a strong advocate for the running game, and I think he would make that room better if Deuce Staley decides to leave in some regard. So yeah, I think that one could be an option. Just looking at the Ravens staff, I saw T. Martin there as he's the QB coach. He could be a potential option. There was another name I saw. I think it's been Willie Taggart, who was the assistant head coach, running backs. I don't know what his offensive coordinator background is. The name sounds familiar, so I just can't pin it to what it, but maybe he's an option too that Monken has in mind. He's also strong with the running game, obviously working with Derrick Henry the last couple years. Um, so yeah, I think there's some options there on that Raven staff, and Monken's obviously been around the league. So if you dive into who was on staff with him in Tampa, maybe who was on staff here in 2019 in Cleveland as potential options, I think Monken's got a strong Rolodex. I think he'd be able to get somebody here with a strong offensive background to help him.
Or if there's anybody still with Georgia from the time that he was there, maybe a guy that's an up and coming quarterback coach or receivers coach, somebody in that aspect that can join this offensive coaching staff, not as a play caller, but, one of these position coaches that could definitely be an option as well. So definitely going to look forward to seeing how his coaching staff shapes up over the next couple weeks. Um, we'll find out for certain if Jim Schwartz is going to be a part of this or not. Definitely a lot to work out there, and we'll keep on talking about this. It's a big hire for them. You know, like we said earlier, not who we were expecting by any means for the Browns to officially name the head coach. So we're gonna have to wait and see and see how this one shakes out here. As we go along. Is there anything else we wanted to mention about Monken before we get on out of here?
No, I'm anxious to hear from him. I'm anxious to hear what he thinks of the current quarterback situation, and what his mindset, his goals are obviously coming to Cleveland. Like this is his first head coaching job in the NFL. Um, he's been in the game a long time. I'm interested to just hear what his plan is, and can't wait to see him get going. Like at first I was angry on it, but reading into Monken a little more and understanding his offensive philosophies and everything, like I'm definitely willing to give this one a shot, and we'll see how it goes. Like obviously, the one name that people have mentioned is Bruce Arians and how long he had to wait to be a head coach, and he had a pretty good run between Arizona and Tampa, and it worked out. Like, not saying it's going to be the same for Cleveland, but Monken's been waiting a long time for this, and I think he's going to seize every little bit of this opportunity.
And I think one last thing for me is that they hired Todd Monken. It seems like they're bringing Warhop to the Browns. You have a former wide receiver coach and now an offensive line coach coming here to Cleveland to hopefully fix two of the biggest issues: wide receiver and offensive line. So hopefully this is the beginning of that. Obviously, none of this means anything without a quarterback, and we'll see how that all shakes out with this offseason. But I think the first steps into fixing this offense have begun, and hopefully we can keep this defense together too. So excited to see how this is all is moving forward for the Browns, and be sure to stay tuned here at the Dawgland. We can find us here on YouTube, um, on Twitter or X. I'm sorry, I still get it all mixed up. Facebook,
It's
TikTok,
all good.
all at the same handle, which is the Dogland. Be sure to give Jack a follow at Jackson McCurry, or yeah, Jackson McCurry, Jack McCurry 08 or Jackson
Jack
Jackson.
McCurry 08.
Jack, I'm out of touch, I guess. Jack McCurry 08 is where
It's
you can
okay.
find them over on X. Me and Anthony Joki. I would be really worried if I got that one wrong. And we will talk to you next time. And always remember, go Browns.
Go Browns.